Hello there friends and welcome. For today's BG3 guide we have all about the best races and also sub-races that the game has to offer, and we'll be covering each of their unique abilities, but also what works best for all different types of build, including spellcasting, melee, ranged, and of course tanking. So let's get right into it as we have a lot of ground to cover. And I want to start with the GITHYANKI race, because honestly it's one of the most stacked ones, amazing for both offenses, defenses, and even utility. First, GITHYANKIs make quite powerful spellcasters, which is rather fitting lore-wise, especially the, let's say, less tankier characters such as Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard, because due to their martial prodigy ratio, they'll get proficiency with both light and medium armor all at once. And in Baldur's Gate 3, unlike Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition or Pathfinder, being proficient with an armor type, or let's say a shield, is enough to let you properly equip it and still retain the ability of casting all of your spells. Of course, it doesn't need any saying, this can highly increase the AC of your caster characters even further. And by the way, the best armors for AC stacking are medium, especially if you fully max your dexterity out. Plus there's plenty of other nice benefits as well, like reducing enemies' attack rolls and so on, all available in light and medium armors. Of course, because Cleric and Druid already start proficient with them, it's not really going to matter that much for these classes. Martial Prodigy has a second benefit, this time for offenses, as it also grants you free proficiency with the short sword and most importantly long sword and even greatsword weapons. Unlike the Pathfinder games, if you know what I mean, in BG3 you do get quite a lot of powerful greatswords. And there's also no base attack bonus progression, which means even the classic spellcaster classes can still have very high to hit percentage chances, just like a fighter, barbarian, ranger and so on, especially when you combine it with the advantage mechanic. So unlike the medium armor proficiency, this can actually help the other spellcasting classes like Druid and Cleric, because by default they won't have proficiency with powerful two-handed weapons like great swords, especially Bards, one of the classes that has the highest amount of attacks per round possible. Anyways, we still have more GITHYANKI benefits, this time for utility, first with the Astral Knowledge ratio. It simply lets you gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability type, which of course increases your ranks in them. Ideally, you want to focus on the abilities that have a lot more skills, for example, Charisma for all of the most important dialogue ones like Intimidation, Persuasion and so on, and also Wisdom for, let's say, Insight and Perception. Don't bother with something like Strength, there isn't really anything that important outside of Athletics, it's just nowhere near as efficient as the other skills. Unless of course you are already proficient in them anyways. Do note that Astral Knowledge will last until long rest, so it's pretty much permanent because you can always activate it after resting, just like your Martial ratio. Last but not least, they also have the ability of casting a few great utility spells for free. Starting with Mage Hand, which is not the best of them all, but later at level 3 you get the ability to enhance your jumps, and most importantly, level 5 is when you get the extremely powerful and highly useful Misty Step teleportation spell once per long rest, as with all of the others. As I said before, GITHYANKIs are without a doubt the most stacked race of them all. They do lack dark vision however, which is a bit annoying. Now let's talk about something different, HALFLINGs. HALFLINGs have probably one of the best, if not the best, ratio of them all, the Lucky ratio. With this, whenever you roll a 1 for attack rolls, ability checks or saving throws, and by the way, rolling a 1 means an automatic failure, so no matter how high your other modifiers are, you'll always fail the roll, including for attacks. Quite annoying when it comes to attacks, because well, you'll be rolling the dice thousands of times in this game, especially for attacks. Anyways, HALFLINGs are almost immune to that, because they can just reroll the die and take the new roll. Of course they can always roll 1 twice, but at that point you might as well accept its fate. Now the only reason I don't really say this is the ultimate ratio of them all is because through the advantage mechanic, which is very easy to acquire in BG3, there's so many ways of getting it, you'll get to roll your dice twice and pick the best result anyways for everything. And also on all numbers rolled, not just when you roll a 1, like a halfling. which means I wouldn't really recommend them for classes that already have advantage on demand, such as Barbarians with their Reckless stance power gained at the 2nd level. Usually the other ways of easily acquiring advantage are through gear, and well, if you go with a Halfling at the very least, you'll still save the slot for someone else. You can also pick your Halfling subrace. Lightfoot grants you advantage on stealth checks, quite powerful because of how busted good stealth is in BG3, while Strongheart will provide resistance, that's 50% less damage taken, and advantage on saving throws against poison. Not really the best because poison damage is kinda rare. But well, lucky by itself is rather good. Just remember, by virtue of being a shorty race, Halflings have less movement speed than others. It's not that much of a downside because there's many ways of increasing your movement. Ideally better for spellcasters or ranged characters that don't really have to move much anyways. Last but not least, all Halflings also have advantage on saving throws against being frightened. One of the most annoying effects because it prevents you from doing pretty much anything, and you even have your characters drop their weapons. Now I want to cover another one of the shorty races, and one of my favorite ones, Gnomes. Amusingly enough, Gnomes make the best tanks in the whole game, that's right, because of their unique ratio, Gnome Cunning, which provides them full advantage on all mental saving throws, which of course highly increases the chances of them making saving throws and resisting the most annoying enemy crowd control effects like Charm, Fear, Slow, and so on. Everything is covered when you have Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma at the same time. The main reason this is important is because when it comes to armor class and gear can highly increase it to the max. Meanwhile, for something similar to the Gnome Cunning ability, well, you'll only find it in very late game gear. Gnomes have all of that for free as early as level 1. What's not to love, right? And just like Halflings, they also have less movement speed, just a little bit less. For their subclasses, they have 3 total. They all have the Dark Vision feature, which is great. Forest Gnomes have the Speak with Animals spell for free. It's nice, but there's plenty of other ways of acquiring it. While Rock Gnomes have proficiency with history checks, not that useful. While the Deep Gnomes have advantage on stealth checks, definitely my favorite of them all. The last shorty race is Dwarf, not really that handy, because they mostly only have advantage and resistance against poison damage. Although you still have proficiency with the classic Dwarf weapons for free, like Battle Axe, Hand Axe, Light Axe, and Warhammer. Gold Dwarf has 1 more hit points per level. Shield Dwarf, free proficiency with light and medium armor, just like GITHYANKI. And the Duergar, superior dark vision, and later the Enlarged Person spell for higher damage. Now, half-elves can also make for quite the versatile characters just like GITHYANKI. First, from their human side, they have the Civil Militia ability, which grants them weapon proficiencies with spear weapons. All of them, including glaives, spikes, and halberds. There's plenty of powerful ones for two-handed damage. And most importantly, free armor proficiency with both light armor and shields. So while they don't get medium armor like GITHYANKI, they have shields, which once again can highly help classes like Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. And by the way, you can combine shields in BG3 with ranged weapons while still benefiting from the bonus to AC. And from their Elven side, Dark Vision, which humans lack, and also Fey Ancestry for advantage on saving throws against Charmed, and you can't be put to sleep. Not that useful, but it can still help a bit. Most importantly, your High Elf subrace can help your character specialize even further. My preferred pick is Wood Half Elf, because you have increased movement speed. Half Drow has Dancing Lights, not that useful, while the High Half Elf, the Firebolt cantrip. Just go with Wood Elf, honestly. You can always benefit from higher movement no matter your character build. As far as the poor humans, I'm afraid they are way past their prime from 3rd edition. They aren't particularly useful in BG3. At most they have Civil Militia, but you know, as I've just said, so does the Half-Elf, except you have more. Your only other benefit is having another skill to be proficient in, and an increase your carrying capacity. But honestly, I would just go with Half-Elf if you really wanted to min-max race, assuming you still want the most important human benefit that is. As far as Elf, honestly, once again, it's the case of the half race being better than the full-blooded parents. Okay, so elves have the classic elven proficiencies with long swords, short swords, and long bows, but they aren't really that useful once again compared to their half variant. There is something to be said about the other elf, the drow, however, although it has a very specific niche. Drows have the superior dark vision power, just like the deep dwarf, but most importantly they are the only race with free proficiency with hand crossbows. Hand crossbows are probably the best ranged weapon in the game because they are the only one that can be dual wielded for even more attacks and of course more damage. Besides that, rapier and short sword, but it's mostly all about hand crossbow. It's just that depending on the class you're picking, for example, bards already have proficiency with hand crossbows by default, and they are usually the go-to race for a massive amount of ranged attacks. As far as the other ones like fighter and ranger, they already have full weapon proficiency through martial weapons anyways. However, something to consider when playing a drow, if you really want, is the druid and the spore druid variant that you can pick at the second level, because you have an ability that enhances the power of all of your attacks with an extra 1d6 necrotic damage. When dual wielding, that's double the extra damage, and well, druids lack hand crossbow proficiency, so it's something to consider if you really want drows to excel at their niche. Tieflings can provide a lot of nice benefits as well. First, they have full resistance to fire damage, that's 50% damage taken, and well, fire, as always, is the most common elemental damage type, including for explosions. And ideally, you want to go with the Zerial Tiefling because it has the most powerful unique abilities of all of the other ones. You start with free access to the Thaumaturgy cantrip, very useful because it provides advantage on intimidation checks. Very useful if you aren't going with a high charisma main character. Most importantly, at level 3 and level 5 you'll get free access to some nice smite spells just like a paladin. Searing Smite at level 3 and Branding Smite at level 5, which can increase your melee damage. They won't work with ranged weapons, however. Just remember, both of these smite spells cost both a normal and also a bonus action. So depending on your class, if you are reliant on your bonus actions, they won't really be that useful later on. Half-Orcs, on the other hand, also have a certain niche, with two very useful ratios. First, savage attacks. Whenever you land a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you deal an extra dice of weapon damage, so in a way, Half-Orcs are the best race for the highest melee critical damage possible. This will even stack with other sources that also increase your critical damage. Second, the Relentless Endurance ability, which is helpful when it comes to tanking hits. If you reach 0 hit points, you'll get 1 hit point instead. But of course it only works once per long rest. And lastly we have the Dragonborns. They are definitely the coolest looking race because of how customizable they are appearance-wise. I mean, changing your dragon color also changes your looks, right? It's not just a palette swap, and you can of course further customize it all by editing your character's appearance. Sadly, as far as racial benefits, Dragonborns are very poor. I think they might as well be the worst race of them all, because their only unique ability is the Dragonborn breath they have, but that deals awful damage, and while a recent patch added scaling, the scaling is still awful, right? Even a late game Dragonborn character will deal garbage damage with your breath. At most, you'll be using this a bit for the early sections of the game, and that's it. Well, I suppose they also have free resistance against the corresponding dragon type element, like the classic Fire for Wet Dragon, but you know, Tieflings also have that for free. Well, alright friends, so this was it for my Ultimate Best Races guide for BG3, all build types covered. If you found this guide useful, please remember to like, subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I truly appreciate your support. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.